as well. Like if you've got a really thin rail, it can become oversensitive. So a guy that's not a very good surfer, he just leans a little bit, and next minute his board responds, and he just goes somewhere where he doesn't want to go, and he's like, no, I want to go that way. And, so the board's all over the place. So generally better surfers can cope with or like a thinner rail, because it means that you just have to think, board responds. But a guy who's still learning, if they have too much sensitivity, it can throw them off and they're all over the place and they just can't get it together. So there's still times where a thick rail is appropriate depending on the skill level of the guy who's riding the board. Yeah. Rails. Okay. Technology. Look, I think it's all out there on the showroom floor. There was a time 10 years ago where technology was a rare thing. Like I had one customer on the East Coast who specialised in new technology, but he was a rare breed. Generally, there's been one accepted technology that boards have been built out of for the last 45, 50 years, and that's PU, and that's polyurethane core, fiberglass, a bit of wood down the middle. That was stock standard. Since Clark Foam went out of business in 2005, that to me feels like the starting point for a lot of new technologies to be accepted, because all of a sudden the world was looking for alternatives. They had to find an alternative because the conventional blank was no longer available and people still had to build boards and surf them. And so now what I see in a lot of surf shops is I see every technology that's available is generally available to the public as well. So it's a good thing. And then obviously with whatever technology you're using, certain contours, certain shapes are more matched to some technologies and not to others. So, and with our thing, we're doing our thing with balsa and also sandwich. We have the EPS and the epoxy. So, it's a good, solid construction in the sense that it's super durable. I had a report only 2 months ago of a guy in Western Australia that just won a longboard contest on a 20-year-old Sunova. So I was like, yeah, someone else actually sent me the email, and they took a picture of the board and they said, and this guy claims that this board is 20 years old, and I saw the picture and I confirmed, yeah, it's 20 years old. I remember when I built it in 1993. So, and it sort of testifies to the durability of this construction. And this was the main thing why I didn't want to work with Firewire. I wanted to go back and do my own thing, because I know that when I build this and I put effort into creating something that's right board for the right person, they're also getting something that they can enjoy for years and years. The amount of customers that have got 12 and 15-year-old boards and they say it still goes as good as the day they got it. The beauty with wood is that when you bend it, it springs back, which is what a tree does. It stands in the wind and it blows around, and at the end of the day, it will spring back into position. And the beauty about wood is it doesn't fatigue like a lot of other materials. Like a lot of materials will, you bend them and they spring back, you bend them 1,000 times and it's almost like internally they start to break down or wear down a bit. And so a lot of times with a PU board, after a year or two, they can feel a little floppy and worn out. They don't have the same kind of zing they had when they were new. Whereas with wood, it maintains its zing or its twang or its pop. It stays alive. So fins.
Big zip.
Yeah, big zip. You can see with fins, there's actually quite a lot of information related to fins, and fins is probably second to the board itself. It's one of the most important aspects of a surfboard. It's like you can have a Formula One race car or a Ferrari, and if you put flat tyres on it, it's just not going to perform like it should. And so it's the same with a surfboard. The right fins have to be part of the equation to match the design of the board and the rider. And for a long time, I basically just did set fins in boards. I kind of refuse to do fin systems because it would frustrate me when customers would put the wrong fins in their board and then they'd fuck up a completely good board, you know, and then they'd come back and they'd go, oh, there's something wrong with my board, it just doesn't work, and I'd go, show us your fins, and I'd go, right, put that fin there, put this fin here, now go and surf it, and they come back a week later, like, oh wow, best board I've ever had. And so, with fin systems, it's great that you can take your fins out, put your fins in, but there's also a really big chance that you can put the wrong fins in and maybe even struggle for months at a time trying to find the right combination. And so, you know, with all our boards now, I always give the recommended fins for that board, for that person. And then, you know, if they don't run those recommended fins, and they may also have some personal preferences that are better, that's great, but you can actually really ruin a board with the wrong fins. Do we have a set of fins? Okay. We're about to talk about fins without fins. Sorry? Okay, plenty of fins. Alright, good. Like customised hand-built fins. Okay. Stephen got a rare treat here. Our fins didn't come, and I had to actually build fins by hand, the old-fashioned way, just so you could get a set of fins. So, yeah, not many people around got these anymore. Okay, fins. A really important part with fins is to have them matched to the weight of the rider. So, just like a surfboard has surface area that needs to be matched to the rider weight, the surface area of a fin also needs to match the rider weight. Because if you can imagine, as you fly down the face of a wave and jam into a bottom turn, the only thing you've got stopping you from sliding out of control is that fin. And all your weight is getting forced against that fin, so that's all that's there stopping you from going into a drift. And so, like, if this fin was for a... Is it too small for you?
You made it.
Okay, I did, but I think that was supposed to be Martin's, I'm not sure. Okay, so let's say a 65 or 70 kilo guy would ride that fin. Then a guy that's 100 kilo would literally need 30% more area. Like, it's completely relevant to body weight. You know, so I would ride a fin that's basically a lot bigger than that to make sure that, you know, my 100 kilo plus doesn't slide out in a turn. So the size of the fin, so we have a range of Sunova fins. I think we've got about 7 fins altogether, and we actually have a little number on them that signifies the weight of the rider that they're matched to. And so they range from, I think, 42 or 43 through to 105. And so the number on the fin helps somebody pick the right fin, because then they can just find the one that's more closely matched to their body weight. Also too, the size of the fin is also relevant to the speed that you're going. So one thing that may sound counterintuitive, but when you run a larger front fin, it actually makes your board looser and easier to turn. And so a lot of people say larger front fin, tail fin's a different story there. What happens is, if you can imagine you're driving along in your car and you hang your arm out the window and you allow your hand to just ride on the wind. So at a certain speed, you can just play with it, you know, at 100 kilometres an hour, 120 or whatever. Now, what happens is, if you drop your speed down to 60 or 80 kilometres an hour, there's not enough force anymore to keep your hand up there, it just falls down. So if you can imagine now, you just stuck a piece of plywood or a piece of cardboard or something to your hand and just created a little bit more area. So now what happens is, at a lower speed, you hang your arm out and just gently let it playing on the wind as you're driving along. And then as soon as you tilt your hand a bit, it's going to respond. So it's the same in small surf. If you run larger front fins, right, as you're moving through the water, once you just turn a little bit, the fins will catch the water and make it respond and go off in a different direction. So, whereas if you have small front fins, they're not going to be as effective. You need a lot more speed, just like in your car, if you hang your arm out the window, you need a lot more speed to make the fins effective. So as a general rule, for small surf, you run larger front fins, and for big surf, you run smaller front fins, because at high speed, if you can imagine now, you're doing 200 kilometres an hour and you've got a bit of wood strapped to your hand, just the subtlest little tilt and it's going to just rip your arm off. So it's the same with surfboards. If you're in big waves and you've got big fins, it can get oversensitive and you go to turn it and it just spins out or just gets out of control. So you basically have bigger fins, small waves, smaller fins, big waves. And of course rider weight, larger fins, larger guy. So now, okay, towing is basically, if you have a set of fins in a board, they're turned into the nose slightly. Okay, so that's basically the meaning of towing. And the reason that you have towing is so that the board doesn't become overly sensitive. And also, like if your fins were parallel or they were perfectly straight to the front of the board and apart, I'm talking about something first here. I'm trying to make this understandable, but it's kind of like you need to know a little bit about everything. So I'll go back to foil for a minute. Okay, with a fin, on a side fin, it's flat on one side and it's curved on the other. So it basically mimics an aeroplane wing. So as an aeroplane's flying forward, the fact that the air or the water, they both do the same thing in this case, they have to part at the leading edge. One takes the low road and goes straight, the other one takes the high road and goes over the top. So what happens is that air or water molecules that go over the top side, they've literally got to spread out a little bit because they've got a greater distance to travel. So as two molecules